Hey guys, it's Dean from Billet Labs, and today I'm excited to show you the assembly of our monoblock. I'm going to hand over to Felix, who's behind the camera, and he's going to talk us through the whole process so you can fit your monoblock to your PC. Okay, let's go.
Hey guys, Felix here. So we've got all our parts laid out. So just to take you through everything, we've got our motherboard, which is a Asus Strix Z690i.
Yeah, it's the ITX version.
We've got our 4090 Founders Edition here, all stripped down already. And then the actual block. So we've got the Intel mounting bracket, we have the block itself, and then we have our backplate for the graphics card. And then over here, we have our washers and screws. So this is washer A, we have 4 of those, washer B and washer C. We have the mounting screws for the block, we have the standoffs for the block, and then we have the mounting screws for the graphics card and backplate. I also have 4 broken in half cocktail sticks here, which I'll explain later on. So first of all, we want to attach the motherboard bracket to the motherboard. So we just put that through from behind like this, exactly the same as any other CPU cooler bracket that you've ever used before. So that just sits on like that, and then we turn it over and you can see the studs poking through the motherboard. So the next step is to place 4 of washer A on top of each of those studs. So that's these washers here. Just put one over each of the studs that are poking through the board. So they're all on there. Next up, we'll take our 4 standoffs, little knurled aluminium pieces, and we'll just screw those onto each of those 4 studs.
Yeah, let me show the guys up close.
Cool. So you want to put them on fairly loose at first, and then tighten them evenly, opposite sides at the same time, just to make sure it's all evenly torqued. But yeah, just finger tight, they don't need to be super tight, they don't need to be cranked at all. And we're then ready to mount our block. So that just goes down directly on top of the standoffs, and that is sitting on the CPU right now. And if you look at this side, this is the VRM heatsink. There is a maximum VRM heatsink height to allow for the clearance for this inlet pipe here. So on this particular motherboard, we did have to cut that down very slightly. I think we took maybe 5 or 10 mil off the top. Do you remember, Dean?
I remember it was one of these fins, so whatever the height of sort of between there and there is.
Right.
So 5 or 6 mil.
Yeah, and it was quite easy to do. It's just a couple of bolts, unscrewed it from underneath, hacksawed it across, sanded it down to make it a bit smooth, and then just painted it black again. So it's fairly easy to do, but we intentionally for this build chose the most built up motherboard with the biggest VRM heatsinks. So on a lot of motherboards you won't need to cut it at all, but for the ones that you do, it's pretty simple to do.
2 screws held in that heatsink.
Exactly, yeah. 2 screws on the back, take it off, cut it, put it back on. So next up, we are now going to mount the block into those standoffs using these 4 screws. These are M4 by 12 mil long, and they take a 2.5 mil Allen key. So there's no spring or anything on these mounting screws. They're a hard mount, so I've not tightened these at all yet. I've just put them in until they start to bite, and then the best thing to do is just apply pressure to the middle and slightly tighten the opposing sides to about the same torque as each other while maintaining pressure on the middle. So if you've mounted any kind of CPU cooler before, you probably won't have much of a problem doing this, but just be careful not to properly crank down one corner, otherwise you will get uneven pressure on your CPU. So that is all mounted now. And this is a dry install obviously, so we've not put thermal paste on the CPU, and we're not going to be putting it on here just for the sake of this video. But at this point you will have a diagram of exactly where the supplied pre-cut thermal pads will go across the 4090 or the 3090 Ti if you've ordered that one. But the next step, once you've got the graphics card already with the thermal pads on it, is to take washer B, which is these ones here. Take 4 of those and place them on the block over these 4 small threaded holes. Not these 4, these are for the AMD mount if you choose that option. So it's these 4 small threaded holes. And just place it over the center of the hole like that. And they'll just sit there, they're not held in by anything at the moment.
And this is probably the trickiest part of the assembly.
Yeah.
You don't want to knock these off, and you just want to be careful when you flip the graphics card over and lay it on top of the block.
Exactly. So at this point, to help with the assembly, that's why I have these 4 small pieces of cocktail stick. So you can use anything about this size, but this basically just goes in and holds the washer in place, just so at the next step you don't accidentally dislodge it. So I'm then going to take my graphics card with thermal pads and paste on it and lower that onto the block. And the easiest way I find is to look through one of these 4 mounting holes. Just look through that and try and get it over the top of the cocktail sticks. So it can take a bit of trial and error, but it's not particularly difficult. So there is the graphics card in place, and at this point you'll then need to add all the thermal pads for the back of the card, but again we're not doing that now. So once those are all on there, we'll take washer C, which there are also 4 of, and place them over the top of each of these sticks.
It's worth noting here that the thermal pads that would be on the graphics card during your install help secure the graphics card, so it won't be wobbling around.
Yeah, so there's a bit of movement here. But yeah, when there's pads underneath, that doesn't happen.
It's much easier with the thermal pads on.
Yeah. So then, once the pads are on, we're at the final step, which is to put the copper backplate on the top. And that works in exactly the same way as the graphics card. Just look through the hole, align it with the stick, and there we go. So that is now on. And this is the point where you really don't want to move anything at all. So what I do is I apply pressure to the middle, remove the sticks, and then we take our 4 final assembly screws and we're just going to screw those through. And you need to remember you're going through the back plate, the washer, the graphics card, another washer, and you're screwing into the block itself. So there's quite a few layers to get through. But if everything's been done correctly, it shouldn't pose much of a problem. So it's good to just get it to bite, or to start screwing into the thread, just so you don't kind of knock any of those washers loose. And I'm using M3 by 16mm stainless steel screws here, but we do, if you want them, also include the same size screw in brass with a slotted head like that. And we know how much everyone hates using slotted screws, so if you're going for the brass option, it's really entirely for looks if you wanted a copper and brass top. But we are using the stainless steel Allen key ones here because it's much easier. Okay. So again, this tightening down is what gives even pressure across the die of the graphics card. So it's very important to apply pressure to the middle and screw very slightly on opposing sides just to make sure that pressure remains even.
And you're still keeping pressure into the middle.
Yes, I am indeed. However, on this piece, as opposed to the block itself mounting to the board, these screws should hit a stop, which I have felt there. It's not a fully hard stop because you're squeezing plastic washers, you're not squeezing a piece of metal by tightening these up, but it should be obvious when these are fully tightened. It should feel a lot more like they're bottoming out than on the previous screws. And there we have it.
So show us the assembled piece.
So it's so well mounted, it's so solid. You can see that there's absolutely no movement at all.
No GPU sag.
You can shake this around, you can mount this to a wall, to a single panel if you're building your own case. Yeah, it's just a really solid piece. There's no movement whatsoever in there. And
that's it.
there we have it. That's
Well,
the assembly process.
Thank you guys for joining us for this assembly video, and we hope to see you very soon. Visit billetlabs.com and check out the monoblock.
Cheers guys.
Bye.